Hello and welcome to another We Are Developers Live. We are here again live at home, and we are all calm, and there's no stress at all because the Congress is like 1.5 weeks away, and thousand things have to be done. But it's great to see you all, and it's great to actually be here again today. So Dan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. I was it's 2.5 weeks, right? Now I'm thinking, wait, have we just lost a week? I mean, yeah, it's coming thick and fast. We know that much. It's like in the background.
Sure.
I think in DevRel, people always don't sort of see it today, that you just get a lot more on your plate when something like this is happening. Even though it's like an in-person event, you sort of think, what are DevRel going to be doing involved in that, before the event? But yeah, there's so much to do, and everybody from We Are Devs, it's just flat out.
Yeah, it starts on Wednesday. So basically, I plan from Tuesday onwards because I'm going to move to the hotel with all the other people from We Are Developers, because I live in Berlin. But last time it was just from my place to go to the venue is going to be harder than from the hotel to the venue, because there's lots of construction going on. Like a few bridges are close to collapsing, or they actually found like weaknesses in them. So they closed the whole area around there. So if you come to the Congress, just don't bring your car. Either like take public transport or take one of these electric scooters that are all over Berlin. They're actually making a lot more sense. Or cycle. It's actually a really good thing to do as well. The area there is not too hard to cycle. There's no hills or anything, so it's going to be fine. Yeah. So today we actually put a few things together, and we had a few people invited, and a few people couldn't go because everybody's on vacation, it seems. But we're very happy to have somebody here that I've been poaching information from for decades, and actually looked at stuff that he's done, and that's Peter Cooper. If you don't know Peter, hello, he's from Cooper Press, I guess, which is your company name, but he's also behind the JavaScript Weekly newsletter, which I've been reading for a long time. How long have you been doing that?
Oh, we're about 14 years.
Oh wow, that's pretty incredible.
A while.
Yeah, and it's always well organized or really nice, and it's a feature set, a newsletter, which I like about it. It's not like, oh, news, and then 2 days later there's the news is not news anymore, or there's lots of information. I get a lot of resources that I look at, and a lot of things are like, okay, here's 15 news items, and you can see that 4 of them have been sold, although they don't say it's been sold. I'm very confused about one of them, that TLDR series of newsletters, which are just taking the Oprah by storm. But from time to time, there's like a post in there about Ozempic, or there's a post in there about some like, and we put a second brain into a mouse and we don't know what happens. And you're like, how is that related to the topic at hand? So it seems like people are trying to sneak things in over time. How do you see the fluctuation in newsletters? Is it like more people coming back to newsletters now that social media has changed, or has it been gradually the same for over the years?
So when I started doing the current round of newsletters in about 2010, 2011, I had a lot of people say, why are you doing that? It's old fashioned. Like, because, email newsletters had a thing like about 20 years ago, 25 years ago in the very early days. But when I was doing it in 2010, they weren't really a thing at all. There were a few companies like Living Social and Groupon and companies like that were using email as like a notification mechanism, but they weren't newsletters, but they were using them as a way of, sending deals to people in real time. And so I kind of noticed this, and I thought, well, hang on, I'm already doing blogging about development and stuff like that. Can I deliver news in the same way? And I managed to convert a serious percentage of my kind of blogging audience into subscribers of the first newsletter that we launched, which was a Ruby one, which is still going. But then what happened over the next few years from that is that other people noticed that it was working, that numbers were growing, and then just suddenly lots of email newsletters started popping up all over the place. And then probably over that span of about 10 years, from like 2011 to 2021, just the amount of email newsletters just went through the roof. And I think a lot of that is to do with, people just weren't getting the engagement they were anymore on social media. Things become very fragmented. And there was this whole idea of owning your audience, as the marketing people like to call it, that I think became important to people. So yeah, there's been a real growth in it. And now I don't even think it's necessarily growing now. It's we're kind of like where blogging was about 10 years ago. It's kind of plateaued, I think, to a certain extent. And we might see another burst at some point, but I don't think we're in a gold rush of newsletters right this moment.
I mean, some platforms push them in your face. I mean, like Substack, for example. I mean, you find a Substack article and then you go back from the tab and you come back to it and you get like the sign up for the newsletter thing in between. You're like, no, I just want to read the article. Like, can you like not do that? Like, it feels like an RSS feed should do the same thing. I do a lot of stuff with feeds. I get a lot of information from them.
Same.
And it seems like they're got a bit of a renaissance as well now that people go back to the Fediverse kind of thing. But it was always interesting for people. I think when Google Reader died, that was a really big issue. That was a thing when RSS feeds were like in everybody's forefront and of thought, and then basically Google Reader got canned. And yeah, I use Feedly and other people use as well, but I always find it weird how everybody then has like, and now we got an AI feature for you to make you summaries of all the feeds. And you're like, I didn't subscribe to them to get summaries. I'm actually happy to take some time and take a breather and read it. So how do you do it? How do you collect your stuff? Like, do you get it from feeds? Do you get it from social media? Do you get it from direct connections?
There's 101 different ways. Obviously, there's like the big targets, so places like Hacker News and stuff like that, which actually the fire hose kind of on Hacker News. So not just the front page, because you know the front page is only limited to 30 things. But if you actually are glued to the newest page that's on Hacker News, people seem to use it as kind of like a place just to submit anything. There's some people that just blog and they just submit it and it never gets anywhere, but they do it over and over and over and over. So it's almost like a free fire hose of technically aligned things that if you pay very close attention to it, like I do, you can find a lot of kind of gold in there that doesn't actually make it to the front page, doesn't get upvoted, that type of thing. So I do find quite a lot of things that way. I'd say probably about at least a quarter of what we link to comes from that type of mechanism. And the same is obviously true for Reddit to a certain extent, although I actually find Reddit tends to be a little bit behind the times. There seems to be a weird delay in people submitting things to Reddit. It's not very timely, I find. But yes, a lot of the rest of it is, well, submissions is a big part of it now, because we have so many subscribers that they're always, hitting reply to the emails and letting me know about things. But then the rest is, subscribing to thousands and thousands of feeds. And, I spend a lot of time going through that process. But obviously I have to spend a lot of time finding new feeds as well, because otherwise it'd just be linking to the same people over and over. So it's always expanding and contracting as people leave and come and go from the community and so on. So yeah, there's just so many different ways in to the system. And of course, things like Blue Sky and X and all these different places as well, probably slightly less valuable, but sometimes an interesting signal comes through on those things.
Yeah, I mean, even LinkedIn has good bits from time to time, but it's really you need to learn how to filter. I think that's
I'm terrible with LinkedIn. Yeah, I need a lesson in LinkedIn for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting big thing. I found that like German LinkedIn is much more organized. I mean, that's a prejudice, but it basically feels like that. There's a lot of information there that might be older, but actually more detailed. There's a lot of stuff in the web development community from German publishers that are basically, or publishers, German people, that basically are very detailed and very thoroughly researched. And it's not a hot news thing, but it's actually a very interesting bit to see how it came along and who's going with it as well. So, I mean, what I miss is news, is email lists, like Web Design L and these kind of things, like back the days, like with Seltman's mailing lists and stuff before we actually had social media. There's so many cool contacts that I got from that time, like in O'Reilly and all these publishing houses. All these people were on old mailing lists. I wonder if that's something to resurrect again.
Could be, although I must admit, I never got into mailing lists. Like I've always looked at them through like web archives of them instead of actually, taking part of them. And I think that's just because I was really into Usenet back in the old days. So I kind of got used to that style of interacting. And mailing lists, I just wasn't used to having that big flood of stuff in my email, client to try and work with. So I never quite got on board with it. But Usenet, I was a massive fan of.
Dan's like glazing over. He's like, Usenet, what the fuck is the pause carriage out there or something? Or
yeah. I'm a little bit like, these are all things that I'm like, yeah, I was aware of that. I read that. I saw that word, but wasn't really aware of what it was. I was just thinking about how like because I feel like because I've been using the internet, I suppose is the best way to put it, since I was about 13, so like 2003, something like that, 2002. And I think about how like I feel like we've maybe gone back to things like newsletters because there's just so much noise now. And the problem is that I think, well, my email is noisy in itself. My inbox is very noisy. There's a lot of rubbish in there. And I find that when you said about expanding and contracting, I thought, yeah, that's how I use newsletters. I subscribe to them. I then get lots of them and I feel like, oh, what have I done? I've subscribed to too many here. There's just so much noise. And then I cut most of them away, and it's the ones that survive. And I feel like it's like, you use the phrase gold mine as well. It's like we're still having to do quite a lot of work to find the newsletter that really like, presses our buttons or we kind of like relate to or like vibe with, whatever phrase you want to use. But yeah, it's finding that sort of way through all the noise, isn't it? It's so tricky, and email might be the only way nowadays.
Yeah, you say that, but I think there are some people that have made it work really well on the web as well, but it's less common at the moment. But I think curation is the core thing. It doesn't matter necessarily what the medium is. So you could even look at someone like, let's say, Theo Brown on YouTube, who's obviously quite well known at the moment in the developer space for, his hot takes on everything like React related. You could see him almost as being a curator because he's often looking at articles probably in a similar way to you do here, and he's going through and he's arguing about them and this, that, and the other. But then you've also got people like on the web. You've got like John Gruber with Daring Fireball. You've got things like the Drudge Report, which actually I don't think Matt Drudge actually edits anymore, but it's kind of like a curated view of the world. And I think those kinds of experiences work across different mediums, whether it's, podcasts or, video or the web. It's just that email is it's a good delivery mechanism. And it's very simple for people that perhaps aren't as charismatic, let's say, as Theo, people that can, carry themselves very well on video. It wouldn't work for me, but whereas email, I can spend time and I can do it in a very asynchronous way. So that works well for me. But yeah, I think curation is the key word here.
Yeah, Theo is an interesting one. I mean, I'm always put off by his thumbnails. I'm like, oh God, really? I mean, we had this discussion before here as well with what's the other channel that used to be a very educational channel and now
Fireship.
Come again?
Fireship.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, that meme overload, that like Rage Comics kind of thing and everything, and like 10,000. I mean, I remember when Figma came out with FigJam, and they asked me as one of the testers, one of the first ones to get in, and like, what do you think of that? Like to do brainstorming and learning things from each other. And I'm like, I'm old. Stop showing me animations and like random things popping up on the screen. Like, I mean, in terms of accessibility, it's already an issue, but I'm like, why do you keep distracting me from the thing you want to say? But it might be that this is just a matter of reaching the Gen Z, or I don't know.
Yeah, Gen Z love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I've seen videos on Twitter where these kind of Gen Z and also Generation Alpha videos where they'll have like gameplay footage while they're talking about something completely different. And it's like, I don't understand why do I need to see someone playing, some sort of game while they're discussing something that's, I just don't get the point. But I think it is something that is very generational because my daughter does it as well. Like she will be watching something on TV, but then also watching a YouTube video at the same time. And I'm like, how does that work? And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm just enjoying them both at the same time. So, I think it's how they work.
When I was programming, I was always listening to audiobooks, and I could do that at the same time because it's a different part of my brain, I guess. And if I listened to music, I just didn't get much coding done because I kept jumping to the next song and cared more about the album and find out things about the artist and stuff. Whereas like listening to Harry Potter while I was coding PHP was actually much, much easier to not be distracted. And I know I got 18 hours of audio now to listen to.
See, it's funny how we're different because for me, I absolutely cannot listen to speech whatsoever while I'm working because I think entirely verbally, like I think in terms of like speaking in my head. So if I'm listening to something, I can't think. So that's kind of hard for my work. So I can listen to music, but I don't hear the words. Like it's weird. So yeah, I think we all think in different ways. I just can't. Yeah. And so that's why I listen to audiobooks to go to sleep because then it stops me from thinking about anything. Okay. So I can fall asleep within like 10 minutes. I just put a podcast on and bam, I'm gone.
Okay. That's not a good sign for the podcast, but like, I was talking to that with my partner the other day, and I just discovered that for myself, I have a soundtrack. I mean, I remember every dream that I had, and every night when I dream, I have one song that repeats in my whole dream. And it feels weird that basically I have a song playlist in my head for every night, and it's the most random things. And then next morning I have to listen to that song to get it out of my head. But like,
it's funny how we're all wired, isn't it?
It's weird. Like, maybe I'm just strange. I mean, many people tell me
we're all strange.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, you got an Intel Hawaii shirt for starters.
Well, yeah, so I'm dressed like I'm on vacation.
Fair enough. Okay, let's go through some of these links that I've been collecting. So split screen window. I like that paper that's been doing the rounds. One of them, the few ones, Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt when Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Task. That title already sounds like generated by AI to a degree, or I don't know if there's a translation issue there. But what it basically says, and a lot of other posts had that lately, that we're actually using a lot less of our brain because of ChatGPT. And it's like, I mean, they did that with MRT scans and everything. It's interesting, isn't it? That we basically, I mean, is this just basically fear-mongering about it? Or do you think there might be something to it that we're getting too much into, like, the computer knows it anyway, so why should I even bother thinking?
I must admit, I've got strong opinions on this paper. I've read this paper. And actually, my problem with it actually is at a deeper level. If you go through it and you look at who they chose to perform these activities upon, they picked 54 people that are all quite young. Or I say young, they're all under 40. And they all go to 5 different universities in the northeast of America, all very high-flying ones like MIT and Harvard and so on. And they get them to write these essays that are about very, what I would call flowery topics. So not things that are technical. They're things like, I can't remember now, but it's things like, why does empathy exist? And like really high-level philosophical things of that kind of nature. So they basically picked people that are very experienced at writing essays. And the way that you can tell this is that when they did the analysis at the end of the activity because they split them into 3 groups. One group could use LLMs only to write their essay. Of course, they could edit everything. They didn't have to just produce it from the LLM, but they used it as their only tool. There was the web search group. They could only use web search like Google. And then there was the brain group, which they could only use what they had to hand. They couldn't, use the web or anything. And I think it was 85% of the brain group managed to include an accurate quote in their essay, whereas only 11% of the LLM group did, because obviously they used quotes that came from the LLM that were completely fabricated. And it got me thinking, the fact that of these people, that if over 80% of them can make accurate quotes on philosophical topics, these are not normal knowledge workers, in my opinion. These are academic people that know things about Voltaire and stuff like that off the top of their head. I could perhaps make about 5 quotes in my entire life from philosophers. So I kind of felt like the people were a little bit, I don't know, they weren't really representative of like modern office workers or knowledge workers. But I also felt there was a bit of a sense that they're all very professional. They're all very good at writing essays. And this is a bit like bringing a bunch of horse riders to drive a car and saying, well, their brain works different when they drive a car. But because they're used to riding a horse. I just kind of feel like this essay this paper doesn't tell us enough. It's a good start and it's well run and well designed, but it doesn't tell me enough about how we're going to adapt to using LLMs. It just tells us that people that aren't used to using them, when they use them, their brain works in a different way. It's like, well, yeah, I get it.
There's also some really interesting things happening there with, I think the other sort of political fact, I suppose, and I don't mean politics, I mean like these are universities who want to fund studies, right? And it makes sense. They want to understand the subject more, and they want to kind of, further our knowledge on it. But we're at such a early stage, aren't we? That like, even if there's a sort of fairly in-depth study, really the only conclusions they can pull out from it at this point are very sort of surface level observations like that. Like, oh, they like you said, they think slightly differently when they do something slightly differently. It's kind of such such a basic conclusion that I found myself like a few months back saying almost every week whenever we looked at these sort of studies, let's just come back to it in 5 years. And I still feel that way, where I'm like, let's just keep studying. Yes, let's keep doing what you did, like criticize and critique the methodology and say, well, that's not right, that doesn't quite work, that only tells us this. And I think with this, it just tells us really how early we are in trying to understand this, and that there is so much research to be done that it's not going to be, we're not going to get any conclusions from 1 or 2 studies. We're only going to get conclusions from long-term, large scale, and then almost like meta-analysis, aren't we, over time? It's we just know so little, really.
I think my problem really isn't necessarily the research, because these things are all run, professionally. They're using the scientific method and everything. It's when they publish these papers with very kind of, catchy titles, and then people on social media use it to kind of prove their biases about things. So like when we had that paper, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, what was it, like LLMs can't think or something or other, everyone's like, oh look, I told you so, LLMs aren't doing any thinking. It's like, well, the paper doesn't actually conclude that. And so there's a whole back and forth about that. So again, you can't just look at this and go, well, people aren't using their brains when they're using LLMs, because that's not really what it says. It's just saying that their cognitive load is a lot lower when they're using LLMs. Now, you're surely having a lower cognitive load is good, because you have a surplus then to actually be more creative and edit things and stuff like that. So yeah, I think people twisting the actual results into their own narrative is the danger, not the research itself.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is always the pithy, clicky headline to come from it. And I mean, people love to show that the machine is not as clever, or that actually scientists are getting things wrong as well. I mean, there's been an attack on intelligence for decades now, and I think it's been. I mean, it shows in some of people being voted into public service that probably have a language that is actually by default showing that they want to be different to these boffins, as the register keeps calling them. It's fascinating to see that the attack on that. I mean, I had discussions about this on public on TV shows as well. Like, for example, A Big Bang Theory started quite funny, and it actually had some really good, in the background you had some blackboards with real physics equations on it and stuff like that. And then it became like blackface for scientists to a degree. It became like, look how stupid and socially awkward these clever people are. And I find it just really fascinating that there is not many shows that actually deal with geekiness and intelligence, and at the same time are not becoming harsh about it. I think the only other thing is Futurama, that's basically by geeks and for geeks. So that makes a lot of sense. But then they did Disenchantment, which is completely off the grid in terms of metaphysics. And then of course there was what was the other one with the scientist and his sidekick? Anyways, there's a lot of stuff where we actually get the science right, but then the headlines actually make it easy to actually disregard it and report it in the wrong fashion. So writing in the age of LLMs was an interesting bit as well, which doesn't load now, which is a long paper, a long article about how LLMs read your stuff and index your stuff. And I mean, I've got 2 problems with that. First of all, it's painful how many people ask me to write things that can be indexed easily by LLMs right now. And it feels like an SEO for, as you said, wrong summaries. And at the same time, it's getting harder and harder for me to find an editor to use that actually doesn't generate tons and tons of non-meaningful paragraphs for me as soon as I start typing. Everybody puts their oh, we help you with that article thing or that email, and most of it is just autocompletion that is just super annoying or repetitive to me. Do you use any editor like that for your newsletters or when you write blog posts, or do you just do it by hand like real people do?
No, we do it by hand. So my opinion is actually AI is very good for when you have a massive fire hose of information and looking for signals in it. I like it on the kind of the reading side of things, but then I want that information and then I want to turn that into what the output is. So I'm always the one producing the output, even if LLM has processed the input to kind of make it more palatable to me, let's say. But yes, I did like this piece though, because it reflects a lot of things that I've seen in content. Because obviously, I read a lot of developer content, and so some people have begun, and I'm sure you've probably noticed this as well. People have started to use things like ChatGPT and Gemini and so on to actually write their posts for them, even if they're just doing the structure and then filling in the middle themselves. You do see these kind of dull, kind of weirdly textbook style writing just appear when you think there would be a little bit more personality, like in previous posts that these people have done, and then it's suddenly getting very dry, and you're like, yeah, there's something going on here. But actually, I'm not going to name names, but I did encounter a blog post from someone who's actually quite well-known developer. They posted on their blog something about a new feature in a programming language. And I was like, I'm sure that feature doesn't exist in programming language. So I went through and I ran tests, and I'm like, this feature definitely isn't in there. And I said to him, this code example you've got just doesn't work. Like, it looks like it should. It's a good feature, but like it doesn't exist even in the Edge version of this language. And they literally like had a massive panic attack because they'd used an LLM to produce this code example. And yeah, I think it probably scared them a bit. But as I say, I'm not going to name names, but this sort of thing is creeping in. So it's something I have to look for. So posts like this that kind of summarize people's experiences of what that type of text looks like is valuable for me to help calibrate my, my compass for looking at these sort of things. But it can be hard to get them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's also when you get to work for a larger company or you work in a DevRel department with lots and lots of people, there's lots of people coming from like marketing that say like, well, we're using this cool piece of software. And I mean, my inbox is full of like cool editors that I can use tomorrow. And it's fascinating to me how many people think like just the generation of it is enough. It feels like that we're flooding the internet with like content that's auto-generated to be read by systems and then summarized for us again. So it feels like there's this shoveling of information into the web, like the AI slop story in there. But that's already happening with blogging as well. And I mean, we try to make our magazine also by hand a lot of most of the time, and we do. And in the past, we tried things out, and as you said, it's very obvious for the initiated to see what was actually AI written still.
Yeah. I mean, editing shouldn't go away. I mean, well, you could even 20 years ago, you could write a book and you could do it in one pass and send it in, and it would still be, crud, essentially. It would just not be very good. You'd need an editor to bring it up to scratch, do the fact-checking, technical review. Well, even if an LLM, even if you get something that's really, really good and it's completely accurate and there's no hallucinations, you still need to have that process of someone actually reading it and editing it and giving it some flavor and fact-checking and all that type of thing. The fact that you're using an LLM doesn't mean you can just scrub that away. Like, you need those extra layers to make something readable.
So Dan, you've been playing with like good prompts to generate stuff from time to time, and I mean, we still haven't taken the plunge. It feels weird to. It feels that the LLM is trying to be helpful, but then you actually rewrite it from scratch anyways afterwards.
Yeah, it's like that sort of, I don't know if it's like false economy or what the phrase would even be, but there's so many times where when I've thought, okay, I'm going to get it to maybe to do a particular task, like you're saying, structuring something, for example, it just makes decisions that you don't want it to make. It comes down on the side of something, or makes a conclusion, or it doesn't want to come to a conclusion. So it sort of plays this game of like, oh well, both sides have credibility, even when you're maybe trying to make a certain point. And I just feel that it strips out the person's voice so much. I think that when we write, there's so much to sort of, I think back to university, and I remember being called out by like a university lecturer, and we didn't write a huge amount of essays, it was media production, but I was called out by a lecturer who just said, you use rhetorical statements all the time. They said, you'll say this is undoubtedly the best thing, right? And they said, you'll always try and sort of rhetorically convince me. And I thought, well, yeah, they're right to pick me up on that. But there's also something about maybe how I speak where I think, well, I probably do that as a walking around human being, right? So it was that they wanted to almost take out any personality and turn it into a very dry academic text. And I feel like that's what LLMs do as their starting point. They do this very diplomatic, we're trying to play both sides. We don't want any real conclusions, even when they're obvious. And it's not, you said earlier on, they're not really thinking. And I think that is such a good point, because a human being would come to a conclusion, even if it was a weak one, because, you know, they know that it's flawed. The LLM will just say, nope, both sides are fine, or go all in on one conclusion. You know, it's not doing that real reasoning where you come to a conclusion based on the evidence and your own opinions and everything you've just discussed. Instead, it just sort of says, here's all the information and I'll regurgitate it again. And it doesn't matter how good the prompt is. It's like you never really get beyond that. It's that thing when you look at it and you know that it's not a human. I remember, I know it sounds like a tangent here, but I remember the film, what was the name of the film? Life of Pi. And I remember the scene, you know, the lion, right? And it was a really good example of everybody saying, sorry, tiger. Ooh, yeah. And people saying, oh, get them wrong, yeah. People saying this is so close but so far off. Like the CGI has gotten so good, but it's just not quite right. It still doesn't look real.
The uncanny valley, yeah.
The uncanny valley, and it's like we just know it's there. It can be so subtle, you know. I think AI now is getting to that point where it's tricking certain demographics. Maybe I've heard people say, you know, boomers can no longer tell the difference between AI generated video and real video. But I think in writing, you can smell it a mile off. You really can. I think you can just tell. And I don't know how they get beyond that. I don't know if I want them to get beyond that. It's a very long-winded way to say it, but yeah.
I mean, one interesting thing which a few resources are right now is that we're all facing a kind of a crisis where it's like we get top Google sources in AI overviews, and I see my blog show up there as well, but the traffic is going away. Like basically there's a lot of like, as all of these systems are actually starting to summarize bits for you, they're actually not sending traffic to your page anymore, which is like, if publication means like clicks and loads and like views, that's a bit of a problem, because we give somebody else the content, like the Googles, the Bings, the Perplexities, kind of, they get the views right now and they actually show ads next to it already. But whatever we publish, we don't get there. And I mean, there's been news of like scraping websites completely without actually asking it. And yeah, the Cloudflare CEO has been going all in about this, where it's like an existential threat for publishers as traffic collapses. Is it maybe just that our model of like publishing with ads around it has finally come to a conclusion and we have to find better ways of doing it? But then subscription is also a big drop-off.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is I think there's been scares of all kinds over the decades. Like, you know, people were getting ad blockers and saying, oh, no, publishing is over. And, you know, there's just been so many different pieces of drama that have occurred over the years, which is why publishing is going to go down the toilet. You know, all videos come along. No one's going to read stuff anymore. And I know, so I think people are beating that drum again. There is actually some data this time, at least, to show that the, you know, amount of direct click-throughs are going down. But then we don't know what the quality of those click-throughs were like anyway, because some sites, especially news sites, you know, someone will click through and they'll be on the page for like 20 seconds and then they're gone again. So they're not actually providing any more to the publisher than they would have if they'd read the AI summary, especially if they don't actually click on any of the ads. And if someone's getting paid to show an ad that then no one is actually engaging with, then what was the point anyway? So, yeah, I must admit, I don't have strong opinions on this other than the fact that I'm not panicking about it. But then I'm not in the position where I deliver tens of millions of page views every month and make money from banner ads. So I'm in a slightly cushioned position, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ad blockers were a great example for that one as well. I mean, I talked to Smashing Magazine, for example, and they're like, holy crap, that was basically like 90% gone. I mean, I used to have ads on my blog, which I don't anymore for like 10 years now. And I used to have like $2,000 a month easily with clicks back then. And then when ad blockers came around, it was like $50. And like, I'm happy I wasn't relying on it. But yeah, it showed. I mean, on the other hand, I always found the smugness of people saying like, "Oh, I have an ad blocker, so the web is much better." And you're like, it's an arms race. You're making advertising more brutal by blocking it, because they will find a way to actually show you stuff. And nowadays, we had it a few shows ago where it's like this 12 meg of data being loaded just to actually see a website because it's like ads and videos and autoplays, and it's just fascinating how we made it hard to publish on the most easy to publish medium out there. like we made it tough to consume for our users because we want to show them things that make us money. But by that way, I mean, we have the same issue with our newsletter as well, and you probably as well. Like when I look at the statistics and people that haven't engaged with the newsletter, that haven't opened it or clicked on anything, and you have like when you send it out, you say like don't send to unengaged people or send to unengaged people. And if you don't send to unengaged people, your click-through will be much higher because it's only people who click it. But then again, you will never actually grow because you don't get to those that didn't click last time. So it's always a race of like, who do I talk to, and do I just throw it out and hope they click it, or do I just see what the people are doing that are actually subscribing to it and interacting with it already? But it's interesting to see that difference and also what it means to search in general. But I mean, we had that before as well on the show. I find that like the 5th or 6th page nowadays on Google shows me the first results rather than everything else is just ads. But I guess they have to make their millions somehow. I like that one as well. The Google Translate tells us about vibe coding. When people said like that vibe coding is now getting rid of all the programmers and like you don't need to have developers anymore, which of course is nonsense. But Google Translate, this is actually, she's a translator, I think a professional. And she said like Google Translate coming around actually gave people more insight into the translation market. And the quality of it was so bad that in the end, they got more business from it. So it might be the same with like Google Maps as well, when there's a logo cartographers are now losing their jobs, or and developers with vibe coding. I find that like a lot of vibe coding stuff, I don't see the point in it. I wouldn't have written it by hand. I would have felt bad if one of my junior developers had to write that stuff. That's for the bin anyways, or just a testing. So yeah, it has its space, but it's interesting that that in this market it actually didn't make a difference in that. Do you think that the development community should be worried about vibe coding taking away business?
I personally don't think so. I saw someone post earlier, I think this week, about they think there's actually going to be a growth in certain types of job where people are kind of signing off on the work that AI produces. So it'll actually cause a growth in that, as opposed to actually, doing all of the, the boilerplate coding and everything. People will be given code from systems, and then they'll be like, yeah, okay, this all makes sense. I sign off on this, because a human needs to have the liability at the end of the day for something that goes into operation. And so you could actually see a growth, because obviously we're producing more code, so we'll need more people to sign off on all of this code and check it and deal with it and manage it and all that type of thing. So I think there will be shifts, but there've been shifts before. Like we saw this with, when jobs were being outsourced to, cheaper countries, when new ecosystems have taken off, and when patterns have changed in the industry. There's always been changes in the makeup of what types of developers we have and what they're doing. Back in the 80s, you're probably more likely to have been a systems analyst than, just a pure day-to-day programmer than you are now, where there's much fewer systems analysts and there's a lot of programmers. These things shift and change all of the time. And I think we're going to have another shift, but I don't necessarily think it's going to lead to contraction of jobs overall in the industry.
I'm just wondering then that this idea of like making analogies with other kind of areas like this, in this case, translation, just made me think of things like drum machines and drummers. There was this era where, even the idea of having a file, if you think about it in the digital sense of like having a file that you could put into a music editor and then use that as a sample. And this is like, we're not even going right back to like the origins of sampling here, right? We're just talking about in the digital sense of using samples. In theory, you could say, well, look, if we can do this, then we no longer need drummers. Equally, you could say this for any area of the fact that now with music production, so much of it is about abstracting away things that are boring, complicated, very technical. For example, finding a guitar tone. So you've got a dry feed going in, just a guitar with no effects on it, and now you're going to use your digital kind of interface and your software to find the guitar sound. Now you could go and do that all analog and record it with a microphone, but do you want to? Does it interest you? Is it boring? Who cares, right? You might just want to write a song. And I feel like that's really where we are with this, where it's not going to just mean that developers no longer exist. It's just changing, as you said there, it's changing what the role is, and it might bring more people to the industry in general, so there might be more competition. But it's a really inflexible way of thinking when people say, well, if the developer role goes away, then look, there's no jobs for us here. It's completely ignoring the fact that the job will change. New jobs that didn't exist will exist, and just like the drum machine, it's not just a silver bullet that's going to say we no longer need humans, because as we said, we quite like the fact that we're all humans doing this, right? We're not just watching robots do it from a distance. So yeah, I agree with you, Peter. It's nice to have somebody on who's, for a change, saying, I'm not that worried, actually. Because so often, so much of this is people, you know, making headlines by kind of freaking out. And then we come on and we sometimes freak each other out. So it's nice to actually have you say, no, I'm not that worried. I agree.
No, but I guess, you know, my privilege and luxury is that I get to kind of look at a lot of what's going on from slightly from the outside. Even though I do, you know, develop software and build things, I'm not a full-time, you know, software developer earning, you know, $200,000 a year at some big company in America that is under constant threat of a manager coming along and saying, oh, we've replaced you with AI. And because I'm not living under that threat, it allows me to perhaps be a little bit more philosophical about it than it would be if, you know, my own livelihood was directly under threat from this. So I completely understand people that do react in that way. And I think we need the balance. I think we need people saying those things, because then it allows us to have the debate and to figure out, you know, what the middle path is for all of this. But yeah, overall, I'm very optimistic about what this is going to do for us, but I can see why people might not be.
Yeah, I mean, the cutting down on people in large corporations is a very interesting point there. I mean, I'm writing an article, writing a talk about this at the moment, where I'm like, maybe it's time to stop looking at the FANG companies as a great company to work for as developers. Maybe that is over, because they have to move so fast and automate so much that basically they don't need people any longer. They basically they're cutting down on workforce a lot right now, because also the way a company is actually measured to be successful by the stock market is profitability per head. So if you manage to actually cut down on headcount because of by using AI and by letting machines write the code for you, your company shares will soar rather than just like being there for people. And that to me is just a very, very horrible way of thinking about like that. I mean, much like automation in the industry, in industrial environments was a big thing. That's coming for us now. And it's actually not a bad idea to actually just think about like other companies to work for or doing your own thing, rather than just like seeing like this is where my big thing is. When you work for large corporations like I did, you see all these people that just use them as springboards. They basically like, I'm going to stay half a year here and 1 year there. And then and people say that if you want to make a big salary in the Silicon Valley, jump from company to company. Don't stay in one company and do something sensible. And that's really, really frustrating to me, because I see work as something that should give back to the company and society, rather than just like accumulating money and then letting it burn. But that might be just because I'm too romantic about this. But I don't know.
And we're all European.
Yeah. I do like that Google. One of my favorite things I found lately in Google Translate is if you actually go to Hindi and you type in "poopen."
Isn't it poop and shart and farten or something? I've seen it on
X recently. You go from you type it in Hindi.
There we go.
And you translate it to English. It's actually full terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talked to people who know Hindi. They said like it's far off. It really makes no sense. But I love that basically just a mock German English mix turns into full terms and conditions. That's just wonderful.
AI will never understand that. See, you know, we could say to it, "What does this mean?" It will never understand.
I like another positive thing like that. It's actually quite a good time to learn software development, because you actually have time. You can automate a lot of stuff out there, but you can really into thinking about like how to make yourself independent from a framework, independent from a language, to basically just learn the basics of it and harden your career for that in the near future that way. So I guess that helps. So that's an interesting bit to see as well. We have far more stuff to talk about, but we don't have time for everything. But I think there is a lot of interesting stuff in there. This was just the this was somebody like saying like, okay, developers are gone because the last 35 days OpenAI Codex merged 345,000 PRs on GitHub. Yeah, that's automated code that basically could get generated and is generated. I don't see this as a threat to engineers. I actually see this as a good opportunity to see where you can slim down your infrastructure and your architecture. If that many PRs can get generated in a week without making much of a difference, then there's probably something in there that doesn't need to be generated in the first place. It really feels weird that
someone's going to be dealing with the consequences of this as well. So
yeah, I mean, it's like when companies say like we manage, we measure the quality of our engineers by lines of code, and I'm like, this is really the worst idea. Like, I mean, there was back in the long time ago, there was a Dilbert about this, where they actually started charging people by how many gave people bonuses by how many bugs they fixed in a month. So he made his rat dance on the keyboard to basically create lots of bugs, and then the rat's asking him like, "How is it doing?" And he's like, "Not good. You just wrote a web browser." Like, it feels like the just the numbers of like how many lines of code or how many PRs have been put in there. It's like, if the PRs are just there to fulfill a test requirement, then maybe that test as it's never failed before is not necessary anymore, because that part of the code doesn't change.
Maybe the next tool that someone needs to build is actually an AI development tool that doesn't write any code whatsoever. All it does is remove code from your project and keep it working, and then see just how small you can get your project.
There was this other blue sky thing where it's like, oh, within like an hour, Claude re-architected my thing, went from so and so many lines of code to so and so many, and created new paradigms, created new things. None of it worked, but it was beautiful.
I was just thinking that before you got to the end of that story. I thought, what am I doing wrong? Because it does that for me, and it's really frustrating. It's like we've said this a few times, how it's like it just decides, well, I'm going to carry on doing the same thing, but I'm just going to do it in a different way. But I'm not going to tidy up the thing that I started doing. So when I saw this 345,000, I thought, how many of those though are like duplicates where you're trying to undo things that you've already done, and then they've merged, and then they've said we didn't actually need any of that. It's got loads of commented out code that it doesn't need anymore. It's like, I feel that there's a little bit of like the numbers are being padded. I don't know.
I find it interesting that CSS Tricks lately keeps coming up with posts about like how to make a better API for intersection mutation observer and resize observer. It feels like that's an interesting thing to look at, because it took us bloody ages to standardize these things and make them supported in browsers. But then people think about the API on top of these primitives. And I mean, you've been around for a long time, Peter, as well, in the JavaScript world. It always fascinated me when we had the Open Web Manifesto and basically said, like, we need primitives for everything. And then no more magic, no more things that actually do things for us. And now people start thinking about APIs on top of the things again, because it's too much. It's too many primitives to use. And I think my favorite example for that is service workers. Service workers, like, I mean, before the offline functionalities that we had were fraught with all kinds of issues, security issues, performance issues, and whatever. But service worker became so complex that people just used abstraction libraries on top of it. And nowadays, we're basically hoping the framework does it, and we don't even think about it properly any longer. Do you think we've overdone it with the going into the nitty-gritty and giving you all the opportunities from a programmatic piece of mind, or is this actually wanted, that we think about people coming up with APIs on top of the basics?
I think all of this happens for a reason. I think people do want these things. There's very rarely instances where, you know, there are massive discussions about things that are simply not required or needed in the world. So like Dart, for example. Yeah, there you go. I'm a bit opinionated on that one. But no, I think one thing that you see a lot is there's always just this building up, as you say, of layers of things. Like, even if you pick something really, really simple and primitive to the web now, like asynchronous HTTP fetching, for example, you know, there was the Microsoft XML HTTP request thing, and then people built libraries on top of that, and then someone built Axios on top of that, and then people built things on top of Axios to allow it to run in Node, and then people are like, oh, hang on, let's do the fetch API instead. It simplifies everything. So the fetch API comes out, and it's like, great, this has simplified everything. And then people build abstractions on top of fetch, and then abstractions on top of that. And it's like over and over and over. And it just seems to be something that is guaranteed to happen anywhere that there's lots of people, lots of interested parties and APIs. They just grow and they mutate and consolidate every now and then, but you end up with all these different approaches to the same tasks. And again, you're seeing with that article you were just looking at, you're seeing the same thing there. It's like, well, what's another way that we can approach this topic? But you see it everywhere. I mean, you know, I do a lot of stuff in the database world, and SQL is just notorious for this problem in handling the same issue in like 10 different ways, with numerous different standardized ways and non-standardized ways of solving the same problem. So I think this is a human thing. And it actually relates a little bit to one of the other articles that you've got, which we're probably not going to get to, which is about the whole JavaScript has ruined the web thing. I think that actually touches on similar topics, where it's like we just keep building systems for everything and massive systems for everything, and you know, why can't we just go back to the basics and do everything in a simple way? And it's just because when you get large groups of people with disparate interests, that's just not what happens. You just end up with lots of different systems, and I don't think there's a way of stopping it.
I mean, I love this discussion, and there's lots of podcasts right now about like, why doesn't HTML have a native include?
Right.
And I mean, we had SHTML, like SSI includes and stuff.
Oh,
like
I love that. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. BBC had that for decades, like even like when it was not necessary anymore, when there were different things, and they were using Ruby in the background, but they were still using SSI for the date and the footer and stuff. But yeah, the idea of HTML, including other HTML, I mean, there's so much security problems in that one. It's just, I mean, that's why we didn't allow for nested iframes. That's why we do it. It's just very bizarre how people want to take a language that is supposed to just structure and make it yet another programming language, much like CSS looks like JavaScript now, and JavaScript starts looking like Python. And it, I mean, I had discussions with that with a few people in the old JavaScript world, and we're like, every time there's a new feature in JavaScript, a new version of ECMAScript, I'm like, what are these things? What problem does it really solve any longer? It seems like we're just trying to steal things from other languages now and bring them into JavaScript to get the new community into JavaScript or something, because I don't see many of these things making a huge difference after ES5, like, or ES6, where we actually started doing things differently.
I think ES6 actually is probably one of the better examples, at least, of adding new features to something, because I would say most, you know, JavaScript developers are now using classes and they're using sets and, you know, various things that were included with ES6. I think that was actually probably one of the more successful, you know, changes to all of the APIs of in the language. But yeah, I take the overall point.
I think one interesting bit is that I thought arrow functions would be a much of a bigger problem, because it was the first time that syntax changed in a breaking fashion in JavaScript. It never did that before, because okay, we had to use like HTML comments in JavaScript a long time ago, but but there it was basically embedding JavaScript in XHTML valid XML files was quite an interesting thing as well. But yeah, arrow functions didn't break the web the way I thought they would be. So the whole like Babel and like other conversion tools, they're kind of not needed any longer. It's like because all the other old browsers that didn't support them died.
No, but we do owe a lot to Babel, like, you know, just in that transitionary period, because it really enabled developers to actually use these things and feel confident about doing so in a time where there was very mixed and muddy support officially for those features. So, you know, those tools are owed a lot in making that transition. And I think, you know, we're seeing the same with TypeScript now. Obviously, people are using that as a way of being able to use enhanced features and then compile them down as well. So, you know, tools like that have really helped. People say they add complexity, but they've actually really helped move the language forward, I think.
Yeah, now that with Node supporting TypeScript natively, that's not the issue at all anymore. So that's a really interesting bit as well. It feels like we're going back to a Java world, but like in a simpler fashion kind of thing. But yeah, types are making sense. I mean, just in terms of auto-documenting things by having types and auto-completion in like editors, it was a very, very interesting thing to see. I found that thing really cute when it comes to like vibe coding and stuff. There's like it's a tool that allows you to actually build little apps for yourself. And instead of just doing a vibe coding thing and asking like Windsurf to do it for you, it actually has a drag and drop interface to actually build them. So this is kind of what it looks like when you take a look at, you got the different number fields and stuff. So it feels like Visual Basic back then, or like Borland C++ builder, but it's just for simple apps to do simple things, much like what people say what vibe coding should be for. But I find that a really cute little idea, much like Scratch used to be for kids to learn programming, that had like these puzzle pieces. And I find these kind of interfaces kind of cool to basically say like, yeah, you don't need an LLM to generate that code for you and actually subscribe to a plan for a huge data provider. But this is just a little tool to build little apps for yourself to do things with them. And I think this it's amazing how browsers have come that these things are very easy to build right now. Like back in the days, we needed Flash for that, right?
Yeah, or Silverlight. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously everyone loved Silverlight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
or was it Flex as well? That was one, wasn't it? Adobe Flex or whatever. That was like Flash, but like on steroids. I can't.
Yeah.
It was very painful.
All right.
I'm
I think we're kind of out of time. The last thing I want to talk about quickly is the Code 100 challenge that we gave people. Because we picked the challengers for Code 100. In case you don't know, Peter, Code 100 is at our Congress, a live coding competition on stage. So people code against each other. Much like they get a computer, they can use any language that they want to. Hang on.
Can they use AI for this, Dan?
No. Well,
what a shame. They can't vibe code this.
No, they're not supposed to. I think the thing is we can always tell, right? Because we've had a couple of people, they'll submit things and you can sometimes, you might leave the comment in, where it's kind of explaining like this function does this and you think, yeah, that's been written by an LLM. I think that don't you love this as well? The beauty of live, it's always that somebody's going to drop off a package when we're just about to finish a show. But there's this. Yeah. So this Hearts and Minds challenge is, it's brilliantly Chris, it's very creative. But they can take any approach they like. We obviously kind of don't work this language kind of open for whichever language they want to use, any approach they want to take. And the beauty of it is that some people will do this in like 3 lines, as you'd always imagine, and some people will do it in 300. But over to you, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, the big challenge for me is always to come up with things that are independent of language. So basically what people should do. So the challenge that I gave people here is basically having this HTML page that does this pile of brains and hearts, and then like saying how many hearts and how many minds are straight, being pointing up, left, down, or bottom. How many minds are on the left side of the bunch and how many hearts are on the right side of the bunch. And ask people for a solution. And we had like a dozen people sending solutions in. It was interesting. Some of them were just trying to sell me their coding environment rather than just solving the problem and stuff. But it was interesting to see the different approaches. And I'm not I can show my solution, and a few others have done similar things. But the trick was basically to take a look at the HTML, of course. And it's kind of it's kind of weird that I took this. I wrote it in PHP to generate the thing, and then I wrote like a failwind.js file to actually turn it back into something that shows up in the browser. And the main thing what I used here is that basically all of it was in the classes here. So you got a class called left, top, rotation, size, color, and then you got brain or heart. So the trick was to get all the divs that actually have classes like on them, then go for the left ones. The left that are less than 50 are on the left-hand side. The ones that are more than 50 are on the right-hand side. So that was simple enough. And the rotation one is basically, it's either 90 degrees, 0 degrees, 170 degrees, 270 degrees, or 360 degrees. So it's multiples of 90. And that was interesting how people did that. They basically, some of them were just like looking at the generated HTML and using like the space it needs on the screen to see where on the screen it is, rather than just using that number. So the trick was just to use the data in the HTML rather than just having to do anything with the rendering, because a lot of people complain like, oh, I'm a backend developer, I don't want to use some rendering stuff in the browser. Because of course you could use get bounding box rectangle and find out which part of the screen they're on, but it's all coming from the classes into the thing. What I found interesting as well with the rotation, that a lot of people forgot about 0 and a lot of people forgot about 360. And other people just looked at 90 only and 180 only and these kind of things, or no rotation at all, which doesn't exist in that HTML. But that was a good thing to consider. I think my favorite trick here is to say that you basically do a modulo of 90. And if the modulo is 0, then you know it's a straight rotation. So that was the trick to sort there. We're going to write a blog post about it in more details as well. And yeah, hopefully it was interesting for people to take a peek at. It's also a good preview of what's to come live on stage. So it's going to be interesting. It was just fascinating for me as somebody who led engineers and had own departments and stuff to see like asking these basics is really, really tough for some people. They're basically because one of the things we say in Code 100 is you cannot use other libraries. And so many people are completely lost when that happens.
I think you might be onto something with that Tailwind thing, Chris. I think you should keep working on that.
Yeah, I mean it's magic. I mean, like,
yeah, I could see this idea taking off, putting stuff in the classes like that.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, like, I've done so many. I also use switch statements, which shows how old I am, rather than having an if else. But
I think that code is kind of cute though, because like for people that haven't ever thought about things like, you know, Tailwind, they just think they put it in and it just kind of comes out the other end. Like obviously this isn't how Tailwind works. It has a compiler and everything, but it's kind of cool just to see like you can do something that's very similar in such a tiny amount of code. It's just kind of fun.
Yeah, I also love the whole vmin thing for the font size, and also the percentage for like 50% left and right. Like vmin and vmax is a really, really cool thing to have in the browser, and not enough people do it. The same with inset. I think inset is such a winner, because before that we had to do top, left, right, and bottom, and now we just inset and see like which part from the screen you want to show something or not, or you just do an overlay with one line of CSS. That's really, really great that we have these things these days. Cool. I think that's it from us from the time. So thanks very much, Peter. I mean, we didn't have a normal show like we normally did. We didn't go through all the things, but I guess we had a lot of interesting things to share in terms of publishers of the web and the collectors of information, because a lot of people ask me like, where do you find all this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot of like sifting through a lot of information to find the gems out there. And it was interesting to learn that you're doing like the Hacker News thing and the live Hacker News rather than like the main page. So yeah, pretty amazing. So any last words you have for our audience? Like anything you want to know from people, anything you want people to do?
No, but I did notice that, because like you always have an interesting programming pun. I know, like, I've watched a few episodes and you always have some interesting puns, which obviously you share on X as well and various other places. And so I figure this show needs at least one. So I've got one for you, which was, I was in a debate the other day about the best name for looping variables, and I won.
Nice.
Very nice. I like that.
There's my dad joke of the day.
Yeah,
so,
we can iterate on that.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to let the side down because I haven't got one ready.
Excellent.
Nicely
well,
done.
Thanks very much, Peter. Just subscribe to his JavaScript Weekly. It's really worthwhile, and all the others that you have. There's like 12 of them by now. Like on
there's 7 at the moment. We used to have like about 12, and then we've narrowed them down over time. But if people want to follow me, they can find me on X at CooperX86, and I'm at various other places, but that's the main place. So.
So that Intel shirt, does it have an arm?
No, it cuts off there. I've still got my tan.
Fair enough. All right. So thanks very much. This was WeAreDevelopers Live for today, ending in chaos as always. We see you next Wednesday for the last show before Congress, I think. Yeah. Then we're going to have a show live at the Congress where we're going to be outside on the stage. They probably put me in the sun again and see what the ginger does with that. And then we go from there. So see you next week online, and see you the week after also online or directly at the Congress here in Berlin. And with that, thanks very much. And thanks very much to Peter and to Dan. And we see you soon. Bye-bye.
you.